away, diversity was increasing as more immigrants moved in, and restaurants were popping up with award-winning international cuisines downtown. Moving home held out its charms. I was excited about proximity to family, how a newer house meant less things falling apart than in our old house, and we wouldn't have to learn a new place. But I wondered, how would I find belonging in the suburbs where everyone, even their houses, looked the same? I craved sustainability, depth, meaning, nuance, the things you find in a city, I reasoned, or at least in the type of rural life championed by Wendell Berry. How did this move fit? How could I fit? Underneath this superiority was a deep fear that I couldn't cut it. I wasn't pretty enough or successful enough. Could I find belonging in the suburbs, or would I be a misfit? I'm comforted by the biblical precedent of God's people laughing at his plans, backing into corners, and running off in the opposite direction. I feel kin to Jonah, thinking he was too good for a place, to Sarah, laughing that God could do the impossible, to Moses, thinking he didn't have the right skill set to serve God's people, to Joshua, who was afraid, to David, who followed his feelings, which led to adultery and murder, to Peter, who said he'd always come through and then ran away, to Paul, who desperately wanted to do everything right. The list goes on. In each story, God restores. So I took a deep breath, said goodbye, and closed the door to our life in Salt Lake City. This was it. We were moving to the suburbs. The geography of nowhere. I realized as the moving truck pulled away from our Salt Lake City home, I couldn't use my place to make me feel special and unique. I'd turned my nose up at the suburbs, thinking they were only superficial and image-obsessed, and their residents were unconcerned with real problems. But I knew there was more, and I knew I was called to love not only individual people, but also my place. Moving home to the suburbs, I longed to discern how to faithfully live in the land of too much. I used to think nothing of my suburban childhood, how each city bled into the other without distinctiveness. I enjoyed the chain stores and was used to driving everywhere. Only when I grew older and moved away did I see how each place formed my loves. Each place fashions what we value. Places form our loves. Are the suburbs really the geography of nowhere that Harold Kunstler calls them? Could a land of commuters, tract homes, strip malls, and ease actually malform our souls? And if we're Christians, how might we live a full Christian life in the suburbs? Do we even notice how the suburbs shape our souls? Should we feel guilty for our privilege, or should we just move? More than 50% of Americans live in suburbs, and many of them desire to live a Christian life. Yet, often the suburbs are ignored. Your place doesn't matter. We're all going to heaven anyway. Denigrated and demeaned. You're selfish if you live in a suburb. You only care about your own safety and advancement. Or seen as a cop-out to a faithful Christian life. If you really loved God, you'd move to Africa or work in an impoverished area. From books to Hollywood jokes, the suburbs aren't supposed to be good for our souls. Even Dave Getz's popular book, Death by Suburb, though helpful, presumes suburban life is toxic for your soul, as if suburbia were uniquely broken by the weight of sin. The suburbs, like any place, exhibit both the goodness of God's creative acts in desiring to foster community, beauty, rest, hospitality, family, and sin in focusing on image, materialism, and individualism to the exclusion of others. We cannot be quick to dismiss the suburbs out of hand. Stories of the suburb. In what they center and in what they hide, all places tell stories through their geography, architecture, and city planning. After World War II, suburbs popped up across America. They were places upwardly mobile, middle-class residents would retreat to in their version of a country manor house placed at a reasonable distance away from the city where usually men worked. Houses became status markers. Cars and commuting became more prevalent. Women increasingly stayed home, removed from the bustle of city life. As suburbs grew, they became whiter and richer. Their racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic diversity wasn't just lowered. The suburbs built inequality to last. Today,